Let's talk about the EU, because Richard Kilpatrick's here, EU policy expert from the European movement. Rachel Reeves was in Brussels yesterday, Richard, said she was overwhelmed by meeting all these other economic leaders of the EU. Shall we have a quick look at what she had to say?
I came here today to begin the reset that the UK government want to see in terms of our relationship with the European Union. And today, in many ways, was a milestone moment because it is the first time that a UK Chancellor has addressed the Eurogroup since we left the European Union. And I was really pleased and overwhelmed, really, by the response that I had from finance ministers across the European Union.
Is she reaching a bit there, Richard, or did she have a really lovely time with them?
Listen, I think it's a significant time, regardless of what Rachel Reeves said in that press conference. I think the fact that it is the first time that the Chancellor will have visited and met with EU finance ministers since Brexit means that it's significant, but it's a significant time for both negotiation partners, right? 2025 will be one of the biggest years for the review of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, and as a result, you know, there is a lot of pressure on this government to achieve economic growth as quickly as possible. It would be silly for it not to engage with an enormous trading bloc that is right next door to us. So listen, I think it's devil's in the detail. You know, I think a lot of this sort of thing is a little bit like transfer deadline day in the Premier League. You know, the one side will say one thing, one side will say another. We'll just have to wait and see.
I mean, what they all are looking for, that's desperately, if they're going to crawl around on the floor looking for something they dropped, it's a bit of growth anywhere, really, isn't it? In Europe, I mean, there isn't any. There's none here. There isn't much anywhere else.
Well, I think there's none in a lot I developed liberal democracies across the world, actually, is there?
Because they've all borrowed too much money at the end of the day, haven't they?
And I think there's equally the economic spectre of a Trump presidency in America and what tariffs will look like and what that impact will be on particularly the service sector here in the UK, but obviously goods and services in Europe as well. So it's an ecosystem, right? So we just have to wait and see how that all pans out. But equally, it's not a zero-sum game. You know, we have a trading relationship, especially the service relationship with the United States. We should have a very strong goods export service or opportunity to export goods with our European neighbours. And that is one area that I hope the Labour government will look at improving.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a problem with in trading relations with the US, but I just wonder what it is that Rachel Reeves thinks she's going to get from the trading relationship with Europe that she doesn't already have.
Well, I think one of the key things is obviously on a veterinary agreement. We need to do more to ensure that our products are as dynamically aligned as possible. That doesn't mean necessarily joining the Single Market or Customs Union. That seems to be a red line for the Labour government. I would obviously argue that actually if we want to be serious about growth, then we have to dynamically align as closely as possible. But the Labour Party...
But you'd be dynamically aligning with countries that have even got lesser growth than we've got, though.
But we'd be dynamically aligning with the largest potential growth sector for our product and for important areas for our exports, such as fishing, farming, etc., which are obviously industries that are under an immense amount of pressure post-Brexit. I mean, since 2019...
farming's under an awful lot of pressure thanks to the Labour government. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm not here to defend the Labour government, but since 2019, 11% of our exports are down to Europe. Like that is largely because of red tape at the border. We need to do a lot more to ensure that we protect our exports. And that's why I hope that the Chancellor is there to act in the interests of the United Kingdom, which once upon a time, of course, were also the interests of the European Union. But we shouldn't be surprised that both sides are there and holding their cards quite close to their chest. And I hope that the UK would act in the interests of UK business in the same way that we would expect the European Union to act in the interest of their business.
Sure. But an awful lot of the red tape is also created by us leaving the European Union, but it didn't have to happen that way, really, did it? I mean, it could have been done in a slightly less red-tapey way, if you know what I mean.
Well, we could have left in a much better relationship, full stop, to be honest with you. I think we are living with the effects of what has been a pretty atrocious relationship, which is why, actually, we are very much in the baby steps process of trying to curb some of the damages that Brexit's caused.
But it wasn't a very good relationship when we were in it. That's the thing. I mean, Angela Merkel just gave a whole series of interviews around her book in which she said that she was personally kind of hurt by the fact that Britain left the European Union. It's quite a long time ago for somebody like her to be still thinking about it.
Yeah, and obviously, like there's always going to be a situation where each individual state has its own interests. But you know, that was the past. This is the future. The question is, what can we do to ensure that we act in the best possible way for British business, and that is ultimately cutting some of the red tape that's been caused by Brexit. Yes,
but the red tape's been caused by the European Union. Is my point. It hasn't been caused by the British government.
Well, listen, the British government signed the TCA. It put in a lot of constraints on, especially European fishing. It has since diverged quite significantly in places like chemical divergence and fishing divergence and environmental divergence. So to suggest that this is a one-way thing is obviously nonsense. I mean, what we need to try and focus on is what sectors of our economy need that help and what sectors of the economy should our government be advocating for. And ultimately, when it comes to the European Union, unlike America, that's our goods and that's predominantly our goods rather than our services. And there will be British producers up and down the country that are desperate for a good set of negotiations in 2025, which will ultimately lead in positive growth, but also the opportunity to reduce the prices in our supermarkets.
Yeah, well, let's see if Labour can get something right, because so far they haven't. Maybe Europe's the one place where they'll get some kind of result. Good to talk to you. Thanks, Richard Kilpatrick, EU policy expert from the European Movement.